Welcome to the new Frontline, a new podcast created and produced by the Freedom Foundation. I'm your host, Siena Rose, and I'm excited to have you with us. Now, if you're watching or listening to this video, you'll likely fall into one of two camps. The first being that you are a supporter and fan of the Freedom Foundation. You like what we do and you're hopefully excited about this new media venture, for which I very much thank you. The second camp is for those of you who are new to our organization, who may have little to no understanding about the issues surrounding public sector unions, or maybe simply curious about what this fight is and why we've chosen to take it up. Now, as someone who until very recently fell into that second camp, I felt it was very appropriate to have the first episode of this podcast be explaining who the Freedom Foundation is, what we do, and in layman's terms, what on earth is going on with public sector unions. But whether you're new to our work or been loving it for a long time, thanks for joining me here at the new Frontline. Let's dive in.
Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look.
I want to start by setting up the premise of the issue. The public perception of government unions is, to put it mildly, a mixed bag. Some people view it as being essential to workplace success. Other people view it as being detrimental and completely unnecessary even. And now I lived in a few different states, Washington, Montana, and now Texas. And in my experience, the basic answer to the question of what do you think about union work or what do you think about unions varies wildly. But across the board, expressing any displeasure with the work that unions do is met with skepticism. Interesting. People have a really hard time putting to words the specifics of union work, good or bad, period. But is it really that difficult? When you take away the smoke and mirrors, what do you actually find? First, government unions are the largest funders of the radical left. For example, did you know that in this most recent presidential election, the biggest funders of liberal candidates were government unions? They gave millions upon millions of dollars to candidates that supported their own individual interests and didn't often give their members the chance to vote on who they would give their collective support to. On the rare chance, of course, that they did do that, if their membership base didn't show preferred support for the candidate that union leadership had, of course, arbitrarily decided they were going to support anyway, the union simply won't endorse at all, instead of endorsing what their members want them to. So case in point, the nation's largest unions, teachers' unions, and government unions, which have millions upon millions of members, all endorsed Kamala Harris and bankrolled her campaign. And the Teamsters, which is the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, didn't endorse anyone this election cycle for the first time since 1996, not because they couldn't pick a candidate, but because when their members were polled and asked, they showed consistent and preferred overwhelming support for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. So sadly, time and time again, we see that these people prefer to prioritize their own misguided agenda in union leadership over listening to the people that they claim to work for, their members. Additionally, did you know that teachers' unions such as the National Education Association, the NEA, and the AFT, which is the American Federation of Teachers, consistently call for radical agenda items that include DEI tactics and other non-essential lessons in the classroom? I mean, maybe it's just me, but I thought teachers' unions were about the teachers, not about the students, or applying whatever social justice nonsense is required to stay relevant. But we see time and time again, that's what they'll do. They'll do whatever it takes to stay relevant, social justice, virtue signaling, whatever it may be, they'll do it. And government unions have shown us, again, that they are the largest funders and supporters of the radical left. Government unions were also literally illegal until 60 years ago. And we have to wonder why this is, right? We have to wonder why these unions were illegal for most of America's history until up about 60 years ago. And there's an answer. It's a pretty simple one. Basically, lawmakers knew that because of the financial incentive and monetary stake that unions have with their members and with everything that's happening around them in government, there would be this huge capacity for corruption. They have found a way to take taxpayer money and fund it into political and privatized interests, a feat that no one else has ever managed to accomplish. So unions, congrats for running an excellent con, I suppose, because that's all this is. And they do this by using their members' dues from their members to fund and promote their favorite political candidates, who in turn get into offices at the federal and state level. And because they are beholden to the union that bankrolled their campaign, these people do whatever the union asks of them. And another thing, you know that one argument that people say that we should thank unions because without them we wouldn't have the weekend? That's simply not true. The original weekend was created by Henry Ford, who during the Industrial Revolution switched his factories of his own accord to the 5-day, 40-hour work week that we know today. And because everyone knew Henry Ford was a trendsetter, they followed suit because they knew that he knew something that they didn't. The original unionization movement, by the way, to refresh us on some middle school history here, was for the private sector only. There were no laws in place for the private sector to ensure working conditions and fair treatment, so they had the unionization movement for that sector specifically. The reason why government unions for the public sector didn't exist is because the laws that existed that protected public employees, the ones that private employees had to rally for, already existed. It's this stupid historical fallacy that we have all come to believe that the unionization movement was so integral to public employee work when it truly wasn't. And I don't know, man. Personally, you call me an optimist, but I refuse to believe that the world has gotten so much worse in 60 years that an organization that was kept illegal for a very good reason has suddenly become invaluable to our daily life. Government unions are also corporations that have a bottom line to meet. They are not these heartwarming grassroots organizations that they desperately want you to believe that they are. And this tenet, I believe, is particularly important because if an organization has merit, it should be able to speak for itself, right? You can take a snapshot of it right now, and its good or bad works will be all that's needed for the organization to stand up on its own. You don't need to theorize what it'll be like in 10 years or pull up historical documents of what it was like 10 years ago. Who it is right now in this moment should be able to tell you all that you need to know. Today, by contrast, government unions ride the reputation of their private sector predecessors, and they love to paint this image that they are the ones who fight for the little guy. I'm here to tell you that is absolutely not true. The things that government unions fight for today are, one, not the same things that private unions initially fought for, and two, not even the same things that government unions initially fought for 60 years ago. The things they fight for today are these minor details that they themselves have manufactured to stay relevant. Case in point, again, teachers' unions. We've talked about the American Federation of Teachers. I'm going to bring them up again. They used to be opposed and would comment publicly on things like textbook censorship in the classroom, which we can clearly see relates directly to a teacher's work in the classroom and their lesson planning. Where today, or 2024, just last year, the AFT commented publicly on the health and wellness of senior citizens. What does that have to do with teaching? So we see that if unions were as effective and as essential as they claim to be, they would have worked themselves out of a job. But somewhere along the line, these union bosses realized that this activism was so incredibly profitable that their organizations became corporations that now have a bottom line to meet if they want to stay in business. And that's all they care about, staying in business and staying in power. And if you want another example, let's look at the values, if that's what you call them, of these unions. The core values of these unions is money. It is not merit. It is not actual hard work. It's not even basic accountability anymore. They have rigged the system so that top-tier employees get compensated the same as people who could not care less about what they're doing. They are literal hypocrites. They preach about equality yet fail to maintain fair standards, all the while these union bosses, it just drives me insane, who drive the nicest cars and stay in the nicest hotels and get a salary raise every year and have not worked a real difficult public job in years, they get richer while their members struggle to live on a basic salary. The next time someone says eat the rich, honestly, first of all, I'd laugh. And second of all, I'd mention union bosses like the National Education Association President Becky Pringle, whose salary just went up to $449,305. That is an absurd amount of money for someone to make who's not even working a difficult job that her union members work every day. I promise you, powerful union bosses who can be president for as long as they want to with zero repercussions, those people, they look at their millions of members as little more than dollar signs with legs. It's infuriating. And we know this to be completely true. We know that this is how they look at their members, truly, because National Education Association's membership has been bleeding since 2018. And despite having thousands of less members than they did 6 years ago, their dues collections continue to rise, and Becky Pringle gets a raise every single year. How does that make sense? How do you lose members yet your dues collections go up? That's suspicious, Rebecca. Something doesn't add up. Do you actually care about your members, or do you just care about your paycheck? These people don't care. They don't care about their members. They run corporations, and all they ever care about is hitting that bottom line. Lastly, government unions are also proponents of communism. Now, again, to give us a little bit of a middle school history refresher in case you need it, I needed it too. It's okay. No judgment here. But a key part of communism is this one-party state, or it's groupthink, the singular organization of people that forces you to rely on each other to survive, right? What unions do is they enforce this particular brand of thinking by supporting it with a narrative that America is a selfish, horrible, forever flawed country where you will never be able to make it on your own. So therefore, of course, you must come join your union. The only option is strength in numbers led by the most radical of the radical. In fact, how silly of you for thinking you could ever make it on your own. If you even want to survive, actually, you have to join your union. That is the narrative that they push. Subtext, straight out the door, that's what they're telling you. Hold that in your head, because that, along with the fact that in school systems today in America, they are producing high school graduates who are illiterate. This is a real thing. I'll put a link to an Epoch Times article below that talks about a young woman, sad story, who graduated high school in 2024 despite her never actually learning to read or write. Allowing this sort of insanity to happen is, one, the fault of the teachers' union's destructive reach, because no longer are they promoting basic tenets of reading, writing, mathematics, science, engineering, anything in the classroom. Instead, they're replacing it with these woke ideologies and radical social justice changes in the classroom that have no place and therefore are helping contribute to our illiteracy rate rising in this country. So that's the first part. And second, this is creating generations of people who are raised to be reliant on each other for everything, God forbid reliant on the government for everything. Need I remind us? We live in the land of the free, baby. We have an Independence Day that we celebrate every year, and yet we're not teaching our children to be independent or what that looks like. It's sad. It's creating, and I do hate this word, but it's creating sheeple. Generations of sheeple who are not raised to be independent anymore and are slowly becoming reliant on these tenets of communism that's making its way into American life every day. And it's a bummer. Like, this is not fun stuff to talk about. This was a real bummer when I first heard about it in depth, when I did my own exploring and investigations into what's happening in our country because of the reach of unions. It's a bummer. It's tough to hear. But enter the Freedom Foundation. The Freedom Foundation is a nationwide organization that fights to defund and take down these big government unions. We believe firmly in individual liberty, free enterprise, and a limited accountable government. We advance this mission every single day through 3 key approaches. 1, we defund government unions in the same way you defund any private sector business. We take their revenue at the source. We do this by running a nationwide opt-out campaign to convince every single public employee in America to opt out of their union and stop paying upwards of $1,000 a year in dues. 2, we sue unions. We have an amazing 14-person legal staff whose sole job is to sue unions and fight for the rights of workers against their unions. And 3, we pass laws to level the playing field and stop the taxpayer support of unions. As I said, these unions are corporations. They're private entities. They don't deserve to be propped up by taxpayer money. As a nonprofit, we don't believe it should cost you to reclaim your liberty, so we don't charge the people we help to do something they should be able to do anyway, and we stand in direct contrast to these big union corporations. We also do a great deal of work to educate and promote the truth of government unions to the American people so that everyone is informed of their rights and empowered to make their own decisions without the real fear of being arbitrarily punished by a powerful union. And make no mistake, government unions are bullies. The fear of being punished by them is very real. For example, there's a story from just a few months ago in December of 2024. There's a California senator named Josh Newman who was running for re-election. He was a pro-union senator. The story makes me absolutely lose it. He was a pro-union senator, but because he chose not to support a union-backed bill that was dead in the water by the time it got to his desk, AFSCME, which is American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, spent $1 million of their member money on ousting him from office. $1 million to make an example out of him, literally. Imagine if they can do that, God forbid, to a California senator in plain sight. Just imagine what they can do to the small town school teacher or a little county employee who just starts asking the wrong questions of their union. This is the battle we fight. Our freedom fighters are completely fed up with big unions acting like they own you. We are the ones who actually work to stand with the little man, the teacher, the county employee, the union member who just doesn't know what to do. We know what to do, and we are here to help. If you know someone who wants to opt out of their union, go to optouttoday.com. If you want to join our fight or learn more about what we do, go to freedomfoundation.com. And remember, the fight for tomorrow starts today. It's time to show unions what we're made of. I'll see you at the front line.